Welcome to another conversation with Duluth Mayor Roger Reinert. I'm Greg Grell. And Mayor, thanks for being here this afternoon.
Thanks for having this conversation.
Just for full disclosure, it's December 12th today.
Right.
Because we're going to talk about some issues that maybe are coming up in the future. But the first thing I thought we'd talk about is the Duluth City Council has voted now to transfer the Lister Park property, the old golf course property, over to DEDA, and they're going to do a study. Talk a little bit about what that's all about.
Yeah, this really has been about a 2-year-long process, and of course longer than that. The last full season of golf at Lester was 2019, and I think it's important, it's been long enough that it's important to remind folks, this has always and only ever been a 27-hole golf course, 18 and then 27, and then has sat for 6 years and really just kind of deteriorated in place. And it was certainly something I heard a lot about on the campaign trail in 2023. We put together a working group in February of 24, my second month in office, to think about what can happen here? What is the next chapter of Lester? Kind of a commitment that it can't just continue to sit. And that working group included a lot of different stakeholders, and they didn't come up with any one recommendation. They actually came up with 3 different ones, all of which frankly required a lot of money in order to implement. So, in my State of the City earlier this year in March, I said, while there wasn't a plan to go forward, and I realized that was disappointing for some folks, there were definitely elements. And those elements included green space and trail connections. I have many adjacent hiking, biking, and ski trails. Some food and beverage, we don't have a lot of those options on the eastern part of town. Potentially golf again, maybe a 9-hole executive, maybe 18-hole of publicly accessible. And then I think really, really important is housing. If there are 2 issues that I hear everywhere I go in the Duluth community, it is the availability and affordability of housing, and it is the rising cost of taxes related to the rising valuation of housing. So this is really an effort to take another step in that direction. I think it's important for folks listening to know that this is a next step. It's not the final step. This land use study is intended to take and look at the entire parcel and look at those factors, engage the community about what could be. But I think we really have an opportunity here to add a new neighborhood to Duluth, which we desperately need, and one that is really built on outdoor amenities instead of sort of adding them in at the end, which is often what we do when we build out residential areas. It's like, oh, that piece of land that nobody wanted, we couldn't build on, that's the park. Like instead we'll be outdoor amenity focused because we know that's what brings people to Duluth. It is definitely our competitive advantage and sort of the regional center market space.
Now, you mentioned one thing, and that is that golf itself is still on the table.
Absolutely.
There's still a possibility that there could be golf there.
And that's the thing with, when you look at this parcel, it's almost 300 acres in total. That is a huge piece of land. So just for comparison, Proctor recently announced a big development with single family homes, with some indoor turf space, and that was a 200-acre parcel. And we have done much more on much less land within the city. So there really is, because of the scale, the opportunity. I think it's been positioned by some as an either or. And I think it's important for the community to remember it has never been a park, and there's not a single mile of official trail on the property. It has always been a golf course. And there's an opportunity here to do all of the above. And, depending on how the land use study turns out, depending on who, or more likely whom, multiples take on trying to build this 300 acres out, golf can certainly still be a part of that equation.
And in fact, it could be a nice amenity for people that live in that neighborhood.
Absolutely. And I think too, when you go back, and folks, if you've not had a chance to do it, we did a housing study now about 2 months ago. It said a couple things that are really critical for us. One is Duluth alone needs to add some 9,000 housing units in the next decade. So that's about 900 a year, pretty simple math, even I can do that. And last year we did 657, and that was a high watermark year. So even last year didn't meet what we need. So we have to be doing housing at scale. And 2 really important pieces of that housing were, number 1, folks that what I call are moving into the 3rd chapter of life. They're likely not working full-time anymore. They're maybe partially or fully retired, might be doing a lot of traveling. They're looking for a smaller home, but they want to own, not rent, something that's one level, maybe 1,400 square feet. does not exist in the Duluth market.
You're describing me, by the way.
Oh, you're not the first person to say that. And what we know is those folks finding the home they're looking for frees up existing housing already in our community. And the other thing is about 15% of what we need to build is actually upper end. It is six-figure professionals who are in our community as physicians or college professors or business executives. They come, they have a family, they can't find what they're looking for, so they pay whatever they need just to grab what's there because the family is coming. So folks like that might want an amenity that, the golf course side housing, which we also don't have within our community. And helping meet those needs frees up existing homes elsewhere, and it helps us keep pricing down.
And we'll move on and talk more housing later, but I did
Sure.
want to follow up that one of the notes for this year was that Anger Park, the golf course the public course that still exists, did turn a profit for the first time in a long time.
Yeah. And of course, that was a combination of several different things. Number one, Lester being offline. Now, I think every golfer out there will acknowledge that many Lester golfers have gone other places. I know somebody told me Two Harbors should send Duluth a thank you note because a lot of Lester golfers ended up there. I know some are over at Nemadji, but many are at Anger. And of course, part of the previous administration's plan with the Lester closure was to make additional investments at Anger, and those investments have been and continue to be made. So I am not a golfer, despite what people say when they come to council meetings, but I hear from golfers that it's become a much more enjoyable golfing experience.
All right, well, one thing coming up real soon is the final vote, the City Council's final vote on your 2026 budget.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you'd like the public to know about that budget?
The budget really, I think, number one, last year was a 0% levy. We didn't increase the city levy for the first time in a decade. Number two, not every property tax dollar goes to the city of Duluth. I deal with at least one of those every single day. Why is the city of Duluth, da, da, da? And it's like, well, first of all, we're not the only thing on your tax statement. About half goes to the county. Roughly a quarter goes to the city. Roughly about the same goes to the school district. And there's a tiny little sliver that goes to things like the sanitary sewer district, the housing authority, the transit authority, things like that. So last year we did 0% because we had clearly heard property taxes are becoming a real thing for folks. And, if you're one of those folks who have said they've doubled in the last 10 years, they have. And it's in part, the city had done about a 10% increase annually year over year for 9 years straight, but also this valuation increase issue. Mm-hmm. Greg, it's, I think, important for folks to just wrestle with this statistic. The average home price in Duluth in 2018 was $185,000. In 2025, $295,000. So a 60% value increase in 6 years.
And that's the actual sales?
And that's actual sales. Mm-hmm. So of course, your taxes are based on a percentage of the value. So even if no level of government increased their levy, your taxes would still have gone up substantially. So acknowledging that, we hit the brakes for a year and we did 0%. This year, still acknowledging that taxes have become a real costly burden for many in our community, especially our fixed income folks. We stuck to a proposed 2.7% levy. Now, 2.7% wasn't made up. It was the actual rate of inflation over the trailing 12 months. So went back and looked at the previous 12 months. What is inflation in the economy? That's a real factor that everybody has to deal with, businesses and homeowners and the city as well. And so that's what I proposed to the city council. The city council, unfortunately, didn't think that was sufficient, and so they added an additional 1%. So folks can see that number reflected on the back of their property tax statement. It does still keep us one of the lowest in all of northeastern Minnesota, which I'm both proud of, and I also think is just the city recognizing that we need to be really good stewards of the fiscal resources that are given to us by the taxpayers. So you mentioned we're recording on Friday the 12th. The council made some amendments to the budget at the meeting on the 8th. They'll be voting for the final budget on this coming Monday, the 15th. I do anticipate that they'll adopt the budget they amended last week, and we'll head into 2026 with what will be, I think, just shy of a 3.7% levy. But again, my proposal was 2.7%.
Now, we'll just go look back a little bit at some of the things that was accomplished with last year's, or it's not quite last year yet, but the 2025 budget. One of the things is the lead water lines. There were a lot of those replaced this year.
Well, and you asked something in the last question that I didn't quite answer. I think it's important as we build the city budget, and I don't think folks always understand the scale of. We are a 920 person organization, $113 million entity. We're the 10th largest employer in the city of Duluth. And I firmly believe that versus our default just immediately asking for more property taxes is to look inside the organization and really look at what our must-dos are and our nice-to-dos. And some of those nice-to-dos we're doing because we just always have. And now is the time to ask those questions of, does it need to be done? Does the city need to do it? Can we be partnering around doing that? And when you look at the must-dos, it is public safety, police and fire, and it is public works, streets and utilities. Mm-hmm. So the fact that we did over 2,000 lead service line replacements last year is something I'm really proud of. As an older city, we're coming up, I think we'll have our we're having some significant anniversary coming up soon. We're an old city. The city of Duluth is actually older than the state of Minnesota. We have some of these significant aging infrastructure issues, and of course, lead service lines bringing the water that people drink to their homes should be concerning for us. And kudos first of all to our public works team who has been out testing all of these. I know I live in the Central Hillside. I had my own water line tested. Turns out I've got it galvanized, so not of concern. But you can actually go online. We have a link on the city website that shows you, one, what is the material that's bringing water to your home? And then two, has your home been tested for from the street to your, into your home? Mm-hmm. So do check that out if you haven't done that already. But that's significant progress. We'll continue to push on that next year because that core infrastructure is, I think, one of our most basic responsibilities to the community.
And you mentioned the roads, and there was a transportation commission established in 2025. Talk just a bit about that, what that will help accomplish for the city. Yeah,
and I'll start by saying we have too many boards and commissions. We have, I think now 41 officially, and that means I make something like 400 appointments annually to the boards and commissions. And it also means we have so many that they are hard to organize and staff and have them do meaningful work for the volunteer service that we're asking residents to do. And in my first State of the City, I spoke to just this issue. I said, and even given that, there might be some things that are missing. And this Transportation Commission one is one that I really think was missing. This will be an opportunity for residents to help us think about how does the built infrastructure for transportation in the city of Duluth work? And how does it work for everyone? We sort of have a default mode of how many cars can we move, how fast, from point A to point B. And as a regional center, it's often how many cars can we move, how fast out of our city. And that's, as a city, that's not the way we should be looking at it. It should be, what is the safest, most convenient, most enjoyable, most sustainable transportation options for our residents? So I think a couple great, the commission I think will be helpful for helping us think bigger because it's easy just to be in the default 66 feet on center curb to curb sidewalk road kind of mode, which really is about cars and less about people. But we also did a couple things this last year that really highlight what can happen when you think differently about the same infrastructure. You're just making different choices. One was the redo of the front side of Hank Jensen Drive near Enger. If folks haven't had a chance to go run or walk or bike in that area, it's amazing. It's now a one-way coming around the lakeside, and then one lane is dedicated to non-motorized so that people can be in that space and also enjoy that area. And you know how I know it's being highly used? Because we don't plow it. So you both get the complaints about it, but you also see all the foot traffic in the fall and snow. And then the other one that's been really amazing was the redo of 6th Avenue East. And And I think that is such a great example. When you go back in time, you find out that 6th Avenue East was paired with the one-ways downtown, which were all meant to be sort of pseudo freeways before we had the freeway. So the one-ways downtown were meant to move people up the shore and through Duluth really as fast as possible in an efficient volume. So we had multiple lanes in one direction. And then 6th Avenue East was meant to be the freeway over the hill to get people out of Duluth into the range. Well, obviously, with Highway 53 and the interstate, those things don't serve that purpose anymore, but they're still built for that purpose. So the effort with 6th Avenue East was, let's get this down to one lane in each direction with a turn lane, with an island in the middle for people that are trying to cross it on foot. And again, I'm a hillside guy. I drive through there literally daily, multiple times daily. And overnight, it changed how that space functions and how it feels. It's calmer, it's safer, it's more inviting. And so I'm excited to work with the Transportation Commission to look at other possibilities. Like, what would a new central entrance look like if it weren't, again, all about moving as many cars as fast as possible? And what would that get us in terms of a different retail experience or residential experience, in the Heights neighborhood?
And I believe that is due for a reconstruction project by MnDOT, right? So.
It is, and I've heard proposals of, keeping the existing lanes and making them all one lane going in one direction, and then taking out a bunch of homes in Duluth Heights and making it one lane going the other direction. I'm like, absolutely not. We can't afford to lose more homes in Duluth, and B, again, we shouldn't be about as many cars as fast as possible. If your commute takes 5 minutes longer, we will, as humans, make other choices and use roads like Highway 53 that are built for that. But in turn, I think we have the opportunity to get better retail experiences, better residential experiences. If you've been to Faux Holic on Central Entrance ever, fabulous restaurant, but you take your life in your hands trying to get out of there back into that traffic. And again, you're doing the same thing, you're just making some intentional choices to balance those needs.
Now, one of your points of emphasis during your 10 years so far has been downtown, and there's a Skywalk study that was happening. What's happened with that study?
Yeah, and I think, just broadly downtown, I think we have to first acknowledge we've not made as much progress as we would like to. Conditions continue to be challenging. We're not alone in that. Downtowns across America are challenged post-pandemic. The loss of substantial commercial employees in a downtown space has had cascading effects. That's then led to the loss of things like financial institutions in a downtown, or restaurants in a downtown without those daily workers. And when you dig into what makes downtown successful, there are multiple components. It is downtown workers, for sure. It is residential, which is something we've spent a lot of time talking about. But it's also sort of the everyday visitor, and that's the part that downtowns are struggling with post-pandemic, with people working more remote and just our workplaces having shifted. But even having said that, there's some good news about downtown Duluth. One is we've made some tangible progress on things. The Cozy, after over 15 years of just sitting as an eyesore downtown, is gone. It definitely changed that whole section of downtown. The Shoppers Ramp is almost completely down. And I think it's important to acknowledge how complicated that project was. It basically had to be disassembled hand by hand. There was no hit the button and it implodes, because it was built into the historic building next to it that we're required to save. And then, as you mentioned, we should be getting back the results of a Skywalk study that was done downtown. And that really came out of a conversation of, given the number of people, the reduced number of people downtown on a daily basis, does it make sense to have 3 miles of elevated skywalk and 30 blocks of street level that we're trying to keep active, vibrant, clean, and safe? And I think most people who spend time downtown go, no, like that equation's not working right now. So, what the study will help us look at is, are there sections that you absolutely want to maintain things like the Radisson or the Holiday Center to the deck? Are there sections that might be private connections because somebody owns the 2 or 3 adjacent buildings and they might be fob accessed for their employees? And then are there sections that you mothball for now until we see additional either commercial or more likely residential presence downtown, and then you can reopen those sections if that makes sense. And there might still be other sections that just go back to the building owner. And I think people forget that skywalks are actually easements within a building that somebody else owns. They're not city property by right. So I think that will be helpful, and that then allows the city, the county, downtown Duluth to apply resources to a more focused area. And I just say to folks, like, we're Minnesotans, put on a jacket, put on your boots, get ready to go outside, and that'll be helpful for people that are trying to be successful at the, Superior and First Street level.
Now, have those decisions been made on the
Not
skywalk?
yet, no. We're still waiting for that to come back. There will, of course, be a presentation to the city council. They'll have to be in partnership with downtown Duluth, who has primary responsibility for operation of that. But it'll be an important starting point. I think one of the themes that hopefully folks are seeing coming into this, almost second year of office for me is I'm not interested in being a status quo mayor. Wasn't elected for that. It was a change election, and trying really hard to look fundamentally at some of these problems and challenges, and what structurally underlies that, and what meaningful change can we make to try and improve circumstances.
Now, one thing that's come up just in the last few days is talk about the downtown Duluth Public Library. And one of the discussions is the downtown library going to close and be moved somewhere else? So talk about that.
Well, for the record, no. There's no plan in place. We live in an era of everything's a conspiracy. So I think, yesterday alone, I had the conspiracy that I personally was editing council videos before they were getting posted online. I was personally rewriting the council's operating rules, and I was secretly moving the library. So I used to get really bothered, and now I'm sort of like the old Jimmy Buffett line, if you can't laugh, you're just gonna go insane. Like, this is just sort of the era we live in. But it is reflective, I think, of a couple really important things. So what is accurate is we were approached about an opportunity with space over the hill in the Arrow Point building. There's an entire floor available. And we're checking that out. Like, I think we are compelled as leaders of this big entity with a lot of taxpayer dollars at stake, and where we want to do better on core city services while also not asking for more money, to look at, are there other models that make sense and work better? Combined with one of the things that I've spent almost 2 years saying now is regional. We, and the library is such a good example. The City of Duluth Library is already a regional library. Somewhere around a third of our library card holders do not live in the City of Duluth, which means they pay nothing for the service. We can't charge for a library card. We don't have any other way other than donations, goodwill, to bring additional revenue in. It is an entire City of Duluth funded service. So, I've now had a couple opportunities. We're doing it every quarter to meet with Mayor Warden Proctor, Mayor Boucher in Hermantown, and Mayor Heim in Rice Lake, to just say, what is it that we could do together as 4 cities that are literally joined at the hip? We share a common border that might end up delivering better services for our residents at a lower price point. So we've talked about the regional park idea. We've talked about the library idea. We've talked about fire. Our neighbors run volunteer fire departments, and that's becoming increasingly difficult as they see the same rise in medical calls that our firefighters see. A great example is Rice Lake has a new fire hall that's within 2 miles of the Woodland Station. The Woodland Station for us needs investment. It's too small, it's outdated. Well, what would it look like if we had an agreement with Rice Lake to help provide fire service for them, and we were able to operate out of their relatively brand new fire hall? I mean, those are the conversations I think taxpayers want us to have. And I do sort of laugh though that everybody wants change, but not that change. They want the change that they have individually thought of is the right thing. But again, I would just circle back and say no decisions have been made. We're definitely exploring options. A building over the hill makes sense if we were to partner with our neighbors. It's easier for their residents to access. But we would always want to keep a downtown location. We know that we have folks downtown that are mobility limited, and so it's convenient for them. We have people who visit downtown. It's the heart of our community, and we want a library to be part of that mix. And again, if we're serious about a downtown residential neighborhood, which I am, a library is an important amenity. It just might not be the footprint of the one that's there now if we were to have a main branch in another location. But again, no decisions have been made. I think we're just doing what good leaders do, exploring options and doing our homework.
Now, earlier we had a conversation about trying to grow the tax base.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's happening downtown is starting to happen a little bit. There's a couple of projects down there. The Lakeview 333 project,
yeah.
That one is a big one. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, coming back to that idea of residential, the Lakeview 333 will be the biggest building built downtown in many years, and it will get its certificate of occupancy. Kudos to our staff who have figured out how to work with these big projects to open them up part by part so an owner can start making some money while continuing to build out the building. We did that with a new apartment complex over the hill where they were able to open half of it while they finished the other half. So, our team really has invested in the motto of get to yes. Let's figure out how to be good partners for these projects. I think Lakeview 333 is going to do similar. They're going to start opening floors instead of the entire thing all at one time.
And this is the building next to the new hospital.
Next to the new hospital, right? The Vision Northland building. Mm-hmm. So I think some of it will be open by the end of the year, with the entirety open in the beginning of next year. But yeah, this will be, potentially 500 to 600 new residents living downtown. A portion of it is long stay or extended stay for people that are going to be at the hospital, but primarily it's market rate rental, which is, again, something we desperately need in the community. And coming back to the library, if we were to end up partnering in a different location and that freed up that site, and our current library building is, really an unhealthy building that's struggling with a lot of maintenance issues, that site could become an amazing location for retail and residential and sort of bookend downtown with a couple residential towers. Our goal downtown is roughly 1,500 residents that are year-round, and that would definitely make a difference in the balance of activity downtown. And one of our biggest challenge, and again, this isn't unique to Duluth, is how to figure out sort of the condo market, so that you mentioned, I described you like a condo downtown describes me. We're in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in the hillside, and no kids. Like I'd be in a condo downtown in a heartbeat, but it doesn't exist, and developers are having a hard time figuring out how to make that product work. But very similar, that would then free up an existing family home somewhere else in our community, and give us folks that, if you're living downtown and you own your home downtown, you're just going to be more of an invested stakeholder downtown.
And before we move on from that project, everybody wants to know what the retail is going to be on the ground floor of Lakeview 333.
Yeah, I do too.
Trader Joe's is one of the rumors.
I am helping this rumor, but folks, there is no truth to the rumor. I just drive by every time and I'm like, that looks like every Trader Joe's I've seen everywhere else. And so if you're listening and you've got a Trader Joe hookup, tell them to get a hold of me, or get a hold of me, because I've literally gone to the website and I'm like, hi, I'm the mayor of Duluth. We would like a Trader Joe's, and no one responded. So,
so still a mystery.
It's still a mystery. I would say, though, whether it's Trader Joe's or another retailer, a grocery store downtown would be fantastic. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't just serve folks living downtown already. It wouldn't just serve folks that we foresee additional folks living downtown within the next 5 years. It would also serve folks that live in near neighborhoods. Again, like I live in the Central Hillside. I don't have grocery store anywhere near. I'm over the hill or out to West Duluth. over to Plaza, there's definitely a need for a grocery store downtown. So Trader Joe's or something else, I think, would be fabulous there.
Even downtown workers on their way home for the night could pick up
Grab
some groceries.
something. Yeah, absolutely.
Before we move on from that, Sofitel, big groundbreaking expansion. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I mean, the Sofitel plant, exciting for so many reasons. Number one, the paper plant in Duluth has been at death's door multiple times, not because of anything to do with the plant, which is run really well, the workers who are fantastic, our community, of course. It's just the paper industry. Everything, things are, if you just sent a text, like, you're not helping the paper industry, yet that's the way the world works. So number two, this addition of, and drive by, the warehouse they're building will be one of the biggest structures ever built in the city of Duluth. I mean, it's just amazing. That I think 12-story structure that's going up is simply to store finished consumer product. So this is the genius of what's happening at Sofitel and has not gotten enough attention. Instead of just making bulk paper that gets shipped somewhere else, on site, they're going to make tissue paper, toilet paper, facial tissue, and paper towels. And all be stored here, and then using our water, rail, and road networks, shipped throughout the upper Midwest and as far as New England. So this is permanency for that facility for decades to come. Now, and an increased, great addition to our commercial tax base. But it also highlights one of the things we've already touched on, the acute need for additional housing in our community. They're trying to hire an additional 200 employees right now. And what's true for Sofitel is not unique for Sofitel. I've visited Sofitel, Alltech, Moline, GPM, Cirrus, all of our manufacturers are effectively stealing each other's employees because we don't have enough workforce. And every single one of them has said we would grow if we had the workforce. Well, we don't have the workforce because we don't have the housing. Right. We would already be over 90,000 people if we had the housing. The jobs are here, people want to live here, they just can't find the housing. So bringing this back, the HR manager at Sofitel told me how they had extended, I think 12 or 13 employment offers and got one person out of it and the number one thing they heard was housing availability and housing affordability. And totally believe that story because we see it trying to hire new police officers, other city employees. I've heard it from other employers. The number one critical issue in Duluth is adding more housing stock, both rental for purchase at all the income levels.
So we'll move on to housing because that is one of the key topics we wanted to talk about. But before we do that, from the outside looking in, it would appear that a lot of apartment buildings have been built in and around Duluth. So why isn't that having an impact on this situation?
I think it is. One of the things you'll see is that you're seeing more for rent signs in the older inventory and you're seeing them stay out there longer. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine who has some rental property in town, and this is, one of our good landlords, personally takes care of them, fixes everything. Had mentioned maybe about a month ago that he had 2 empty units, and he's like, I've never had empty units. And then 2 empty units that he's having a tough time filling. And I think, I'm sure an underlying reason is a decent portion of tenants are going to the newer buildings that have all the amenities. I toured the one up on Central Entrance across from Pawn America, and I mean, they have like golf simulator in the building. I'm like, wow, where was that when I was renting? So I do think it's having an impact. And you're then starting to see rents come down. It's going to start in older inventory before it is in newer. But where I think we're really struggling is the one level that we've talked about, things like townhouses and things like condos. So where is our higher density for rent and for purchase? So, projects like the one that Titanium is doing up in Woodland, they already have interest for those and they haven't even broken ground yet because they've got folks who want to get out of a house but want to stay in the same zip code, be close to family and friends. Again, the opportunities downtown. But from what I understand from developers is there's an issue with a builder warranty that stays with the property for a decade, and so producing rentals becomes more attractive because you've got income that offsets that liability. But I think we have to try and work I need to do more homework on that, but if it's a thing, then I think we need to work with the legislature to try and address that, because we definitely have a for purchase townhouse and condo market. People want the product, but it's just not being built.
So talking about some of the housing that was developed during 2025, looking at some of the notes I have, 150 new housing units in 2025. What is that considered non-apartment housing, new housing?
And actually, that number should be bigger than that when you look at
Yeah.
things like the apartment building in Lincoln Park that sat half built for almost 2 years. It'll be coming to, it'll get its certificate of occupancy, if not by the end of this year, very early in next year. Lakeview is not included in those numbers. So, it's closer to, I did this homework the other day, it's, I think, closer to double or triple that number. But again, they are mostly apartments. And so, coming back to this Lester conversation, where are our opportunities to build single family and higher density for purchase at scale? And they really come down to, three locations of size. One is downtown, which we've talked about, conversion of commercial buildings into residential. One is the former Central High School site, which we've talked about before, previously known as the Incline Project, and then Lester. And as I said to the council, we only own one of those. We own Lester. Here is our opportunity to lead. We can talk about it, we can encourage, but we can't force private property owners to do what we want or even anything with their property. But I think, Greg, it presents the challenge that really is a cultural one for Duluth, and that is we effectively didn't grow for decades. From 1980 through the most recent census, Duluth's population stayed flat. In the last census, we grew by 400 people, half of 1%. Well, since the last census to now, it's estimated we've had 1,600 new residents. And between now and 2030, we're estimated to add at least that many more. I think we're going to hit 90,000 by 2030 without adding a much housing inventory. So that's going to make housing even more expensive. So we have to, what I started saying is, with decades of not having growth, what we became really good at was the custom one-off home. Mm-hmm. So we'd add, a handful of homes each year because they were custom built for somebody. We need to get back to post World War II, where we're building hundreds. We're building, entire new neighborhoods, because that's what the data and people's stories tell us. And one of the dichotomies I've seen in our community is, if you have a home, this is not a pressing issue for you. Maybe the taxes are, but the home prices, the market and the rental and home prices is not. But if you've been out there looking in the last year, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There is not a lot out there, and it's very expensive. So, we are compelled to figure out how to build housing at scale again. And as I said, I think there are three great opportunities: downtown, the former Central High School site, and Lester, to add hundreds of new housing units.
That just brings me to the kind of summation of this. There was the Housing Summit in November to focus on more ways to make housing possible. Did you see some good development out of that?
Yeah. One of the things that we wanted to do with that was convey to an audience, number one, that our team is here to work with folks. Duluth has this historic reputation of a tough place to do things. And I will tell you, 2 years in, I'm very proud of our team. I talked about this earlier. I think they really have adopted the how do we get to yes motto. And that doesn't mean that the answer will never be no. Sometimes it has to be no. But what it means is no but. And I tell our team, no one is better positioned for you to give someone alternatives than you are. Like, they're not the experts. They have in their head this one option. You know that there might be 5 different things that can get to that same place. And I've really seen our team step up to that challenge. And I've heard it from folks too. Like, they've had great experiences working with the city team to get things done. So part of the Housing Summit was to convey that message. A big part of the Housing Summit was to share with folks where property was available. We've had the internal team, our property team, our planning and economic development team, going through every parcel that the city owns, and what makes sense to get back on the tax base, either as residential or commercial. Because another thing that folks will be surprised to learn is we are quickly running out of commercial space in the city of Duluth. That's a great problem to have, but it will soon limit our ability to grow our tax base. So there's a lot of property that's just in city title. It is not park land. It's just property that the city owns. And so our team went through that, looked at where they could assemble some parcels to do something of bigger scale, and shared that with an external audience. And then thirdly, our goal was especially to try to get more non-local developers to come and think about Duluth and understand what the housing market was, what the commercial market was, and consider Duluth as a place that they might want to do business.
And developers have gone to the city in the past may find that the city is a little bit friendlier now to development than it was a few years back.
It's definitely one of the messages we were trying to convey at the Housing Summit was we want to be partners. We understand we have a housing need. We understand we have a commercial need, and we understand that we don't build anything. All we do is hopefully help make this process faster, easier, and more efficient for you. And I would just end and make sure I include in that topic, like this work is not done. The Housing Summit wasn't the end. The Housing Summit was the beginning. You know, we're looking at things like, what would it look like if we had kind of a set template for a single family, a duplex, a triplex, that were ready to go? Yeah. And if you were looking to build a home in Duluth and you wanted to use this plan that's already been pre-approved, you know, with maybe minor cosmetic changes, start building tomorrow. You don't need to have a 6-month process to get your plan approved. We've already approved this kind of set plan, or a handful of set plans that you could choose from. That would not only help the individual who's trying to build a home and make it more affordable, it would also help the developer who's trying to do tract housing, you know, things at scale. And, you know, even in my neighborhood, when I drive on 7th Street, I can look at these 5 houses and they were the same house, right? This one's got a dormer, this one's got 2 dormers, this one has no dormer. They were the exact same thing, built at the exact same time. And it is that kind of housing production again that will not only you know, make those options more affordable, just the economies of scale in construction, they will literally change the pricing dynamic of housing in the community. And I encourage people, like, this is not my expertise. The Minneapolis Fed did some really great work on this, because Minneapolis has taken a housing of all kinds in all neighborhoods at all price points approach. It's really taken an inventory approach to their housing. And they were unique in a major metropolitan area and not seeing dramatic increases in rental and sale prices just because there was inventory. You know, supply and demand is still a thing.
Now, before we move on from housing, you touched on it a bit earlier, and that was the Incline Village project, which fell apart last summer. This past
language
summer.
I don't use anymore.
You don't use that?
Call it the former Central High School.
The former Central High School, right. Yeah, that was the name of the project.
Yeah.
And you did mention the city doesn't own that property, but obviously it's within the city and it would add to the tax base, so on. And what a beautiful site. I mean, I've always thought they put Duluth Central on the wrong spot there. They should have put the parking lot behind the school.
Right.
But maybe the thought was, boy, that would be really distracting if you were a kid sitting there seeing that view. But at any rate, beautiful site. Any new prospects at this point?
Nothing at this point, you know, and I will say, you know, our team took a kind of a beating around this. You know, we came into office with this project almost to completion. The council voted on it January of my first year as mayor. And in the last 2 years, we've completely built almost the entire leadership team, including in planning and economic development. You know, so before I answer your question, I'll just give kudos to our team, Director Ben Van Tassel, Jen Moses, who runs our planning side, Tricia Hobbs, who runs our economic development side, you know, who raised concerns about things that they were seeing, raised concerns about continuing to push forward, and given the pretty significant TIF district that was there. And I think rightly so, you know, put a red flag up and, you know, asked for the developer and their finance and legal team to deliver on some things that were in their development agreement. You know, and when they couldn't, that's when the agreement fell apart. And we were unwilling to make extensions to that because of some of the underlying concerns. So the short answer is the same folks still own the property, and they have every right to do whatever they want with it, including nothing. But we are hopeful of, if not with them, with others, to try and do something on that site, because it is an amazing location. You've got the new school administrative facilities up there. We've already done the infrastructure work. New utilities have been run. The road has been redone. Of course, it's an amazing, much like Leicester can be, it's an amazing connection to outdoor amenities, to the view. There's a hiking and biking trail that's right below, so the connection to that trail. I just think it will be a fantastic location for condo, for apartment, for maybe townhouse. Probably not single family, just given the size of the location, but also some retail, food and beverage. I know Duluth's Best Bread was looking at a location there, because you have kind of a captive population, an entirely contained neighborhood. So it is definitely something that we would like to see move forward. We would love to talk again to that developer or another one, because it is a great piece of property that really, we talk shovel ready all the time. It is shovel ready. It is ready to go.
Now, we only have a few minutes left, so I'll hit a couple of last things. Before we finish on a positive note, you mentioned being, a change mayor, and because of that, you take a lot of criticism. I know when I read social media posts, there's a lot of theories out there, a lot of things that aren't really true. So how do you as mayor kind of first deal with that, and also try to present, well, here's what's really happening in a way that people, can trust it?
Well, I mean, number one, I sort of acknowledge this is the era we're living in. The era of social media is anything that's said is true. And if it is engaged with, the analytics spin it up, and so you see more of it. We are, with social media, allowed to have whatever opinion, whether it's factual or not, and then immediately have it verified by others who are no more or no less an expert than the author of that opinion might be. So just sort of accept that. Number two, like just for me as an individual, it's a very different era to be living in, and I've had to definitely, people always say, oh, you got to have a thick skin. Like, I did not until this job. And, I've had to work on, one of my own personal growths is just be unbothered. I was elected to do this work. I'm going to do this work. A core value for me is to do the things I say I'm going to do. So I'm absolutely committed to do that. And re-elections then take care of themselves. I am not serving to figure out whether the community, wants me to do it again. The community will let me know if they want me to do it again. I'm here to do what I think we need to do in the time that I have already been given. So, I fully expect 2026 to be a big year. We've got a lot of big things, internal structural change, figuring out how to work with our neighbors, figuring out, again, how to meet a pretty significant budget deficit while not asking for a lot more in property taxes. And none of that is met with status quo. But I also think in big challenges, I think this is a Spider-Man quote. I'm not an action hero, superhero person, but with great challenges comes great opportunity. And so many of the challenges we now face are legacy. I mean, they really are of a community that was founded in 1858. A community that in 1960 was 110,000 people with no neighbors. We were the community of northeastern Minnesota. And the infrastructure challenges we have are a product of that. In 1960, we were the only library because we were the only city. Well, now we have 3 neighbors. And with those 3 neighbors, we're 55% of St. Louis County's population. If we were to build a library system today, it would not look like the one we currently have. If we were to build a fire station system today, it would not look like the one we currently have. The stations we currently have in Duluth are based on horse-drawn wagons. I mean, we would just look at things differently. So I think with great challenges comes great opportunities, and doing the hard things is actually what gives me the most job satisfaction and fulfillment. I don't care for some of what I think are more of the petty politics, and in Duluth we make everything political. And then, I really enjoy getting out into the community and just being with folks, because as soon as you get offline, and I'll do the same thing I did this year over the holidays, I did last year, I'm unplugging, and I'm going to encourage other people to do the same thing. Get offline, be with real people, your family, your friends, your neighbors. You find out that what online, it seems like the sky is falling. Number one, most people aren't even paying attention to. They're living their lives and taking kids to hockey and soccer and trying to pay the bills and spend some time with the people that they love and care about. And what they most want from the city is for things just to work. They just want local government to do local government things. And that's absolutely what I'm committed to do. So I take a lot of reassurance in knowing that the loud voices online are a really small part of the population, and the vast majority of people are just happy when things work well at City Hall. We're not asking for a lot of their money. We're trying to focus on what we do and do it really well, and that's my commitment in 2026 and 2027, and for as long as Duluth asks me to serve in this role.
All right, and finally, we'll wrap up with, usually we make personal resolutions for the
Yeah.
new year. Do you have any resolutions for the city of Duluth for the new year?
Well, I do think that 2026, my resolution is we're going to tackle big challenges. We're not going to punt. We're not going to slow roll. We're not going to be status quo. We know that change is difficult. Like we joked earlier, everyone wants change, but not that change. But we cannot just continue. The numbers don't work. We can't continue to do what we've always done in the way we've always done it. We either need dramatically more revenues, which we know people are not supportive of, or we have to fundamentally think about things differently, either what we do or how we invite folks to partner with us. And then, personally for me, and maybe coming back to your previous question, I want to be really more attentive to kind of my own self-care routine. It's really important for me that I get in runs and I get to the gym. It's important to me. I have a little small group that I meet with to be grounded in, my faith calling, and just to do those sorts of things that take care of me. Because at the end of the day, I think the danger we're running in the era of social media is we turn people into caricatures. And I think it's directly related to this rise in political violence. It's much easier to take harmful action towards a caricature than it is to a human. And I think it's so important that we remember real people are doing this work, whether they're mayor or city council or just serving on our boards and commissions. These are our friends and neighbors. We're a big, small town. And I think one of my other resolutions for us as a community would be, let's use our big, small town to our advantage, to push back on some of this really ugly and negative and borderline, violent language we're seeing online, and say, like, no, not in Duluth. We can have disagreements. We can take on tough things, and we don't have to be the ones who behave that way. We can actually be role models for the rest of the nation on how to do better with respect and civility and kindness and grace.
Well, Duluth Mayor.
What about for you? You're not going to.
My resolutions, I need to get back to the gym. Let's just say that. I've been caring for my grandkids for almost 2 years.
There you go.
Which has kind of consumed my time.
Being a good grandpa.
My wife is about ready to retire, so that's going to free up some more time.
All right.
And so that's what we're looking for. But I just wanted to say, Duluth Mayor Roger Reinert, thank you again.
Thank you, Greg.
Happy holidays and Happy New Year.
All right. Thanks, Greg.
And thank you for watching. I'm Greg Grell.